Hello everyone, this is Ben again with Meet the Neighbors. Sorry about that first video. It was my first video I've ever made. I was a little nervous and even more nervous about the fact that this being such a controversial subject made it even more nerve-wracking for me. But I feel it's so important that I share this with you. I spent 18 months studying the surface of Mars, and I need you guys to see this so you have an understanding of what's going on. My plan is to bring these things out sort of in the order in which I found them, so that you sort of learn about them in the way that I did. And the first items that I found aren't all that exciting, although they certainly are man-made. They're not dirt, rocks, or ice, so they won't be very exciting at first, but it will give you an idea of what kind of things we're looking at on Mars. So to get started, I found a lot of these storage tanks on Mars. There are lots of pipelines and storage tanks on Mars, and the interesting thing about most of the tanks that I find on Mars is that they have this hieroglyphic writing on them. It's not the typical writing that you would find here on Earth. Let's see if we can blow this up a little bit. You can maybe make out the symbols on the tanks. You can see that they are individual symbols on them, and this sort of tells them what's in these tanks and what they're used for. It's the same as you would here on Earth. If you can imagine a large propane tank outside of a commercial building or something, there are symbols on the tanks telling you that, you know, it's flammable or it's propane or whatever. And for them, it's no different. All of these tanks and pipelines are labeled according to what they're used for. So we'll see more of that as the pictures come on. So these are the things I started to find first on Mars. And there are a lot of them. There are lots of pipelines and storage tanks all over the planet. Here's a series of pipes stacked up, as you can kind of see them. And I know a lot of you are going to say, well, this is all nothing but pixelation. And after looking at this stuff for the past 18 months, yes, there is pixelation here. However, the larger items always seem to stand out. Whatever NASA or JPL uses to try to hide these things, the larger items always stand out, and you can see them. On this particular set of pipes that are stacked up, again, here you go, more hieroglyphic writing on the tank, and this star symbol is pretty prevalent on most of the pipelines and storage tanks on Mars. And I'll blow this up for you a little bit and see if we can kind of get an idea of what we're looking at here. It's difficult to make out, but interesting story. One night I was, looking for these tanks and things, and I found one that was pretty clear, pretty easy to see, and I was able to bring it up. And without telling my daughter what she was looking at, I said, Ashley, can you read what that tank says? And she said, yeah, I can read part of it. And I said, well, go ahead, tell me what it says. And she said, I can read Tut, T-U-T. And I said, well, you mean like King Tut? And she said, yeah, like King Tut. I can't read the rest of it, but that's what I can see. So it kind of blew my mind, and was a pretty cool moment. So there you go. There's more pipes. You can clearly see that this is not a large rock or a pile of dirt. Okay, let's move on. Here's another one, another large, different area, um, large pipeline or storage tank. And again, the star symbol shows up. So I'm sure whatever this particular pipe is, it same thing as the other one. And you find a lot of these, this big dark area here, it's usually near a crater. This is a hole in the ground, and these pipes are always found starting at the edge of these craters. So whatever they're doing, whatever they're piping out of the ground is coming up from the holes in the ground into these tanks and then headed off to whatever destination they need it to go to. So again, there's your star symbol. It looks to me like a star. It's difficult to make out, but that same symbol shows up a lot. All right, let's see. Okay, here's a large cluster of them, almost like it's some kind of refinery or something. Again, lots of pixelation. I understand that. And spending so much time looking at the surface of this, you start to realize what is pixelation and what are actual items. Always the larger items stand out. They, for whatever reason, NASA and JPL cannot hide these large items, so they stand out. And again, if we look back at these pipes and tanks back here, the star symbols are there, and the hieroglyphic writing is on them, telling them what are on these tanks, what's in these tanks. So really difficult to make out, but it is there, and of course the star symbols are there as well. Okay. Here's another tank or facility I found. Again, this right in here is another big hole in the ground. And of course there's more tanks and pipelines coming out of here. Difficult to make out through all this pixelation, but again shows the larger items do stand out. This particular one, can't make out the star symbols not on it or any writing, but I could clearly make out this piece here. So I took the picture of it, and again, this was a big hole in the ground, a big crater. So interesting. This here, again, as you can see the surface of Mars here, they did their best to try to hide this, but again, these large buildings or storage tanks or facilities, whatever they might be, stand out again. You can see some things here in the background. And just so you know, these pictures will get much, much better. You'll be able to see things much clearer, and there's a whole lot more interesting things to come. I just wanted you guys to get a taste of some of the first things I was able to find as I started looking at this. As I understood the landscape better and how this all worked, I started bringing out more and more interesting things. You'll see artifacts, you'll see geoglyphs and sculptures and all kinds of things until ultimately toward the end I will bring absolute proof of life on Mars, as if this wasn't enough, but it's unmistakable. But we're going to start you out. You're going to see it the way I started to learn about it and see it. And we'll work our way up to the really exciting things. So as you can see, some kind of, I don't know, structure or plant. This is, these are, I'm quite sure, are buildings of some kind. This looks like your typical overhead door on a garage that you would roll up to get in and out. There are some more buildings back in here, another door, something in front of it, and this is, I believe, another storage tank. If you look really close, you can kind of see the pipe coming in and out of this storage tank here. Over here, I believe it to be what looks like a small building. Looks like it has some sort of overhang on it. Looks like some typical construction you would see here on Earth. So these were buildings and things I found on the surface. And again, perfect example of they try to use pixelation to confuse you or hide what's really there. And again, the larger items just stand out. I'm not 100% sure what these are here, what this is, but there are symbols on them, not in the bright white fashion that you saw earlier, but there are dark symbols on this particular storage tank or whatever it might be. I can't tell you for sure what it is, but there are lots and lots of these things. The pipelines, there are pipelines that you can clearly see on Mars, and they run, some of them, for hundreds of miles across the planet. Let's see. Okay, this is just another picture of the one I showed you earlier. This being the crater or hole in the ground, this dark area, and this being the pipeline running out. If you look real close, you can start to see lots of other things. And these are not the types of things that we should see on an empty planet. This is a blown up shot of the hieroglyphs that we saw in the, I believe, the first tank, storage tank I showed you. And if you look close, you can tell that they are individual symbols. Difficult to make out what they are exactly, but they are there. And I guess this one to me kind of looks like, I guess this would be like a fuselage of a helicopter, possibly with a tail rotor. Most likely that's not what it is, but kind of looks that way to me. Here's a blown up shot of one of the other ones I showed you. Tough to make out again what this is, but it almost certainly looks like it was highlighted in some way inside a box on the tank. There you go. There's a good indication of it being highlighted there and whatever the writing is inside it. If you look close here, it's, you know, one of the legs supporting this pipeline. Here we go. Is another very blurred picture. I can't stress enough, the pictures will get better. Just stay with me, and they will get better and better. The artifacts and things will get better, clearer, and here's the a better shot of the multiple tanks that are stacked up, or multiple pipelines that are out there, and again, more. There you go, the writing on them. Here's a good shot of the that first tank I showed you. Really difficult to make out the writing on them, but it's there, and they're all over this planet, these tanks. Okay, here's a great picture of pipelines running along the ground all across Mars, and the interesting part about this is they look like they've been there so long that the vegetation has literally started to grow over the pipes. And these are the types of pipelines that run for miles and miles across Mars. And believe me, there is vegetation. There is ground vegetation. There is trees. And I will show that as well as we go on. Okay, this is clearly a picture of storage tanks here on Earth, and I just wanted, in case you were wondering what we were looking at, I brought this up to kind of show kind of what we're seeing. Here we go on Earth again, more pipelines, tanks, storage tanks, and things. Same ideas here as it would be, and this is a really good one actually. This one actually shows the writing on the tank, depicting what is stored in this tank, whether it's flammable, and basically tells everyone what it's used for. And okay, now here's a really interesting thing. This particular pipeline I found on the moon. And the interesting thing about it is not that the fact that it's on the moon to begin with, but that the writing on these pipelines on the moon are the same symbols and writing that you found on the pipelines on Mars. So whoever's working on the moon are the same guys that are working on Mars. So really interesting. And if you look at this close enough, you can actually see the legs or the stanchions supporting this pipeline. So that's really pretty crazy. So I think that's all I have for today. Again, thanks for stopping by. The pictures will get better, more interesting, clearer, and eventually the absolute proof that there is life on Mars will come out, and I'll show you. So again, please subscribe, hit the notification button, and I'll bring you another video. Thanks again.